Come on in.
Hi, we're MTV Cribs.
Oh, nice. Welcome to the stylish studio here.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for showing us around and showing us into your space. We definitely want to have a look around your studio. But first, give us a little intro. Name, occupation.
Let's see. So my name's Kyle Trowbridge, professor here, primarily of painting. I've been here 21 years, and I guess the other hats I wear is undergraduate director / undergraduate advisor. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing here, and then I also make art, which makes sense, right? So.
No, what's a typical day in the studio look like for you?
Oh, there's nothing typical right now, I think, happening, simply because of, I guess, COVID. We can't escape that, right? So a typical day, I guess pre-COVID, you would have caught me painting on canvas, working on essentially non-objective, abstracted paintings. I think once COVID hit, I found it in a weird way to be a blessing. It was an excuse to sort of break away from my normal practices and engage in a lot of these crazy ideas I have kind of working around in my head. And so at this point right now, I've got really diverse, separate projects that are all going on, that I have a tendency to kind of rotate like a pinball machine, essentially bouncing back and forth between these things. So it ranges from, which you'll see in a moment, non-objective, sort of these kind of low art, non-objective ballpoint pen drawings that I sort of build machines and little robots to kind of assist me in drawing. I kind of have fallen in love with photography a little bit, and so messing around with the camera. But just like the drawings that I referenced, I had a tendency to sort of get into building my own lenses, because with photography, again, I'm not after the perfect shot. I'm not capable of that. I'm not after perfection. I'm really after the imperfections. And so I create these lenses that just give me strange kind of strange effects. But strangely enough, I'll show you those in a moment. I've gotten pretty lucky. Some of the lenses actually work pretty damn well. So I get excited about that. And so there's a weird thing in me where I feel like I have to develop the mechanics to then make the art. It's all part of the process for me. And then painting wise, again, typically I'm a non-objective painter, as I mentioned. But as of late, I found myself just sort of doing small oil painting, small portraiture, kind of fixated on Trump and his cronies, if I can say that.
Let me see
and
these.
So just messing around. So those are a couple pictures sort of in progress. And that just keeps me sort of painting. But that's been fun, because that's something really I have not engaged in any portraiture or figurative work. Hell, it's been probably easily 10-15 years. It's not what I normally do. So this has been a wonderful, again, this weird distraction. And so, yeah, I've been having kind of some fun doing that. And then the last thing that I've been working on is a side project, which is really not just about me, but it's this thing that I've started, Antilectual Recordings. And that is basically, I have had a love affair with music since I was young, little. And to me, the art making and the music, they are one and the same. They always have been. And so I've been really, really fortunate over the years to meet a lot of interesting people, a lot of artists. And it's kind of funny, but we have these discussions, and you would think it would always sort of backtrack to art or favorite artists, but really what happens is the conversations always have a tendency to fall into music. So, whether it's certain weird, obscure bands or things of that nature. And over time, what I found was there was a lot of people like me that were sort of closet musicians making music, but it wasn't what they were known for. It wasn't their forte. It wasn't what they did, but it was just another creative outlet. And so the more and more people I met that were sort of doing this, I felt it was really, really important to kind of to document it, to capture it. And so I've been kind of creating these lathe cut, and I'll show you these lathe cut 7-inch records in super limited editions. So a lot of times, really editions of 15 to 18, something like that, where the artist makes all the packaging. These records are cut one by hand, and yeah, I'll show you that process. But that's been a lot of fun, and solely because I'm working with a lot of interesting people, and at the same time, it's this wonderful sort of giving. But again, I can get into depth on that in a little bit. But,
show me the setup of your studio in terms of like,
so,
how'd you put it together?
Yeah, so technically,
this is a big machine.
yeah, that actually literally was just rolled this in a few days ago, not too long ago. And I don't know, it's going to be interesting, but it was an opportunity. It was an opportunity to use it. It wasn't being used, and I figured since I'm in this weird place right now, right, where I'm experimenting and trying everything, I said, why not? Let's bring this in. And who knows, I'll probably be trying to run sheets of plywood through the thing before I know it. Probably end up breaking the thing, but we'll see. But the way that I've got the space set up, obviously it's not the largest space, so I've got to sort of, what I found was early on, I've got to remain organized.
Well, I got to tell you, it looks very organized.
Yeah, and you know, it's part of it, because early on when I wasn't, I'd be working on things and bumping into things and breaking things, and so to really maximize the space, I've really had to, again, everything's got to kind of have a place, really sort of building little lofts for storage, using shelving, keeping things up and off the floor, and so, you know, I've been fortunate. It's been able to work for me. And this space is crazy. A lot of people don't realize it, but those people that maybe do know me, some of the larger paintings, some of those like 100-inch paintings, 96, 98-inch paintings, those were all done in this room, believe it or not. And so that would mean me stretching like every square inch of wall. And so typically what you were seeing on the other end, that's my office. So when I do advising, I know this is kind of a strange place for students to come in. They're looking around like it's a candy shop, but I do a lot of advising and talk to students here at the desk there. And then I view that kind of as storage and office, and then I view this side basically as my working side. And so typically I can have 3 working walls going.
Yeah, you set up your walls.
Yeah, and so I can work this way. So when I was painting large, I could have 3 good sized paintings going. But this is sort of that work side for me. And I try to keep the space divided that way and sort of organized that way.
Okay, I have to ask, who is this?
You know what? So this, I don't know who this is. Okay, it's really, really bizarre to me because I was at the Goodwill and this was sitting, you know, they've got the shelves of just junk. This was sitting there and it's marked as 99 cents and the photo's in it. And I'm thinking like, well, is the photograph really of any worth? Why are they selling this? Because the frame was already cracked, right? Mm-hmm. So the frame doesn't even have value at this point. And then I just sort of, I couldn't help it, but I'm thinking about who this person is. Who would have discarded this, right? How would his loved ones have just been like, oh, whatever, Jimmy, you know, you're gone. Toss it aside and donate it. And then the more I investigated, it's obviously this graduation picture. You start to get into like, it looks like he's got like a cauliflower ear. His eyes, like, you know, one eye is much smaller than the other. It's kind of bizarre. So my heart just kind of went out. And I'm like, you know what? I got to take this guy home with me. He's been abandoned. So that is, yeah. Don't know who he is, but he's my studio partner.
Well,
so he hangs out.
He might see this, so you never know.
Well, look, if for whatever damn reason you end up seeing this, please get a hold of me and contact me because we have lots to talk about. Because my mind, I've written an entire story for this guy in my head.
We'll get you guys connected.
Yeah.
So, and the paints.
Yeah.
Now, is there something that you have to have in your in the studio when you work? It's any type of tools. I want to know what kind of music you listen to, podcasts you listen to, if any.
Well, I'll tell you this, like, so paint-wise, there's nothing that I need. I really consider myself, my approach to everything. So whether it be making music, whether it be drawing, painting, I am sort of, I would consider myself a minimalist. Now, the compositions may not appear that way, but I really like to strip down. To me, less variables is better. So it's not a situation where I've got 1,000 little devices, of course, unless I'm making them, you know, but paint-wise, stuff that I need to have, one thing that I do in my practice as a painter, I don't buy titanium white or regular acrylic white. I have a tendency to buy house paint by the gallon. One, it's cost effective, but I like the viscosity better. So I use that to tint all my colors that are technically art paints, right? So with that said, that's the one thing, because I like how it alters the viscosity. I like how the spreadability of that paint. And again, I like the tinting effect. So I use kind of a big, cheap sort of house paint. Actually, you know, something like Glidden, Speedwall. This is like Home Depot's cheap version. And sometimes what I found is, strangely enough, instead of going with like a flat, I actually like a little semi-gloss in the mix. And once it mixes with sort of a flat paint, I don't know, it behaves well. So that's a weird working practice. But other than that, like, you know, special brushes, things of that nature, you know, I have a tendency to get attached to a particular brush, and usually I'll just abuse a brush until it dies and then kind of move on. And which is the case, like those are a bunch of nice new brushes in one of these, and you know, the reality is eventually I'll get to them, but it's after I end up destroying or killing some other brushes. Paint wise, I've got to say I'm a Utrecht fan, if we're just talking label. You know, as you can see up on the shelf in front of you, like, I mean, it's an array of Utrecht. I like their acrylic paint. And again, when I paint non-objectively, I work in acrylic. And it just makes sense simply because of the sheer size of the pictures, you know. And so it's more cost effective. But I do like Utrecht, and I like the fact that it's a heavy bodied paint. And so it's opaque, it spreads well, it covers. But I ended up getting really organized with the paints, simply because I just got tired of digging through barrels, you know.
This is almost like a store.
Yeah. And so I had them in baskets, and I was constantly having to dig for stuff. And then what would happen was, I knew I had particular colors, but I was too lazy to dig them from the bottom of the pile. So then I'd just start making my own color, right? And then I realized, what the hell are you doing? You've got this stuff. You can get to the end result faster. Just get organized. So now I can quickly scan and look, hey, am I looking for a phthalo blue? Am I looking for an ultramarine blue? Do I need something warm or cool? And it's there, and I can grab it, and it's just efficient. And for me, making art, it's all about efficiency, you know? That's one thing. So
now you have to tell me about these things.
So
this is so cool.
Yeah, so one of the things that I had been messing with, one of these crazy endeavors, these COVID sort of trips that I'm taking, it started with just simple sort of ballpoint pen drawings, right? And that idea of kind of, again, just using non-art materials. This is very much that idea of using a ballpoint pen. It's just not an art material, right? It's not, we're not thinking about archival quality. And I love the fact that it's just a standard office tool. Anybody has access to it. And so it's that lowbrow, that kind of low-end approach, very much like music. It's the exact same thing to me. I like crappy guitars. I use crappy equipment. It just renders weird, different sounds. And so the ballpoint pen, it's the same thing. So it just started to grow, and I got into manufacturing. You know what? I don't even know how this really started, to be quite honest. It started with me. I'm a tinkerer, and it started with just cannibalizing, like taking motors out of like CD players, you know, things of that nature, right? Anything that's going to rotate. And so the idea was sort of taking that, creating, maybe powering it with like, this is like 3 volts of battery power. And so I can turn it on, and what it'll do is it ends up, it's sort of self-propelled, and it'll rotate based on the weight that I put at the top of the motor. And so in this case, what I'm doing is I'm kind of just using a wine cork. Sadly, we've got, during COVID, there's a lot of these at home.
Yeah.
But with that said, I can alter the effect, right? This can get really strange again. But just by changing the distribution of weight on the motor, I can kind of, it can get really clumsy and skip and bounce, right? Or again, like I said, I can get more of an even distribution, which is more sort of propeller oriented. And that can buzz around. Okay.
And the outcome.
And so typically, like this. Well, this is, believe it or not, like I would say 80% of this was actually done by hand.
Wow.
And so a lot of this, the circles in this case were basically just me sort of hitting this repetition and moving along. But not always indicative of the pieces. I will use templates, things of that nature. So I can kind of, if you want, let's do this. I'll give you an idea.
Oh my gosh. You're actually going to give us a demo.
And so, so building these guys, so the concept of the tripod makes sense because obviously it can stand that way. But I've got a lot of these like clumsy guys. So these were attempts with a dual motor on 9 volts with 4 pens. This thing actually, I believe it's dead. I got to work it out. But this thing started to kind of work very much in a sort of straight, awkward linear pattern, which I liked. This guy, this is another tripod. That's a 9 volt with a CD motor in it. And that thing's pretty aggressive. You'll see like a huge difference in terms of powering it with like 3 volts versus 9 volts. The thing gets, it just starts to tear. Then this was like the granddaddy quad, but I tried to make it an sort of, what do we want to call it? An octapen. But the idea was I could set 4 on the interior, 4 on the exterior, swap pens out with closed pins, And again, this runs on 3 volts. I'm using the concept of the corked weight. This guy's clumsy. He's not quite there yet. I think I got to switch it out to 9 volts to power it just because of the sheer size and the weight. I'm thinking maybe even more. It just kind of depends. But yeah, so working on all these little guys. This was another one that this is sort of kind of almost looks like a tattoo gun. And this is one I'm working on that's more of like a single oscillating line that sort of will just give me this wonderful skip that I can actually draw with but control and get kind of an interesting mark with. So
these are amazing.
But yeah, they can be a hell of a lot of fun. So what I end up doing, so a lot of times I will start with, I can kind of create bumpers, and so I'll use templates sometimes. Then I will also kind of use guides to kind of control things. Right. Well, so sometimes what happens is the pen.
But I love those markings though.
Is inking up. Let's get it going. You can see it kind of ink coagulates at the base.
Right.
All right. Yeah, so I mean, these are crude. It's total clothespins, office materials. This is stuff laying around the house that basically, you can see, it's giving me a repeated line. Right now, it'll move in a circle. Right. Now this can also change depending upon if I change sort of the overall height. And then I can kind of, what I'll do sometimes is I'll box it in to sort of force other lines. But sometimes what I'll end up doing is just really kind of working it with my hand and just sort of drawing. this way. And so if I really want to hold something in, or sometimes I'll go against, it wants to fight, it wants to rotate, so then I'll use something like this as a way to kind of keep it from going against the grain and work it this way. Now typically when I'm working like this, what I'm actually doing is I'm responding to music.
Yeah.
You know, so typically this wouldn't happen as it is. I mean, usually I'll put something on like, again, and this is that music connection I'm talking about, but Peter Brotzman can be pretty aggressive, avant-garde, noisy kind of jazz, but the classics too. Ornette Coleman, I have just in love with the guy. Coltrane, anything these guys, it just, the music runs through me and it's weird. And so I realized long ago, I didn't quite understand avant-garde jazz at first. It was one of those things that I liked 50s and 60s bebop and things like that.
I do too.
Sense. But the avant-garde, I always was like, it's bordering on noisy. Until one day I was in the studio and it was a situation, it's like a language that all of a sudden I could understand. And what it took was me sort of imagining that I was there listening to it live. Because it is so improvisational, you have to kind of get into that mindset and understand that these guys are talking to one another and it is just happening and they are lost in that moment. Once you accept that, you get sucked into it, you get lost in that moment. And so what happens with these machines as I'm working many times is I will, I'll try to get lost in that moment. I'll put the music on and I act as if I'm playing my instrument, which is one of these robots, right? And so this idea of sort of trying to equate what I'm hearing sound-wise or articulate that into some sort of linear element, and just sort of play along with them technically. And so many times, a lot of these pictures will be titled after particular records I was listening to, and I consider them collaborations.
I gotta tell you, when I first saw them, I told you that I felt that I could see the music.
Yeah, I mean, and which is fantastic. And again, I don't know if I've fleshed it all out. It's one of those things where, to me, this is still very much a work in progress, still trying to figure it out. Figuring out how I can use the tools, but also, because this is not about the randomness to me that the robots create. Because I could easily just let these things go and say, yay, I'm making art.
Go where it goes.
I can't throw it 100% a chance. It's just not in me. And so I use it because I love the way it articulates. I love the skips, the dotted lines. I love if I bear down on it, I can get a richer, darker mark. So it affords me certain marks that wouldn't necessarily happen by hand. But with that, I like to control the chaos that the machine provide me, right? And so that is where I start to get into this concept of, can I compose within that chaos, within that mark making? And so that's where I'm headed. Now it's like, all right, how do I control these tools as I get used to them, right? It's like picking up the guitar. You learn a few chords, then you learn a few more, then you start to write songs. This is what's happening. I've built a guitar, I'm learning the chords, and now I'm trying to write songs with them, right? And so that's the idea. That's what's taking place. But I really do, I view these as strict collaborations with the musicians that I'm listening to, and strangely enough.
So it does tie in with your project, with Antilectual Recordings.
Yeah. Like I said, I can't separate this love affair for music. It's very difficult for me to, when I walk into a room, usually one of the first things I do, I'm flipping on something, music. I'm turning something on. Now, and again, I'm not saying I'm a total jazz head. I'm a punker too. I mean, so I'll listen to a ton of just old punk rock and kind of just anything that's good at this point. Anything that sort of I find inspiring or moving. And so, yeah, my tastes in music are extremely diverse. But that's what's so wonderful about the Antilectual situation, the project, I guess we'll call it.
Yeah.
Is because the artists that I'm working with are so diverse, right? because a lot of people are like, oh, so you started a record label. I'm like, no. This has nothing to do with me being a record label. Mm-hmm. Because this very much, because usually record labels have a particular sound, right? They cater to certain genres. I'm telling you right now, we've got 3 releases so far. And you know what? I can grab them so you can kind of see what's going on here.
Yeah, I want to see.
What's best? Is this a good spot?
Yeah.
So, this is Ornette. That's Miles. All right. So, so the releases are super, super diverse right now. I'm in the process of putting out the 3rd release. So we're really stoked on it. So the first release was, of course, me, because I was the guinea pig, right? And the idea was I wanted to see how this was going to work. And so I did a very small edition of, in this case, I think this was an edition of 18, and ended up creating the record. And then what we ended up doing was sort of creating, I say we, but it's me, mm-hmm. Creating this picture disc record. So kind of this obviously obscured photograph, self-portrait, montage of a couple different pictures of myself. So it's like my face is melting away. Mm-hmm. Kind of fun with that. And that again goes back to, this was shot with some of these weird lenses that I'm making. And so that's kind of fun. But and then this is technically what we call a lathe cut record. And what that is, you can kind of see the grooves here.
I see it.
This is plexiglass. So I'm not cutting on vinyl. This is a regular sheet of thermoplastic, just plexiglass. And I keep them square just because I felt like this is sort of, it works. It works on the turntable, and it sort of becomes the identity, I think, of Antilectual. So we've got these weird square records, and they play. The fidelity is low. Of course, it's not quite as rich as, as say, vinyl, mm-hmm. But they really, really do work. And so my record was basically kind of just garage rock, kind of punky, just noisy. And as you can see, what I ended up doing was, just after a while, just loving to play music, I started just sort of playing by myself. And I ended up, this was several years back, when Charlie, my daughter, was a little bit younger. I bought her a kid's drum kit, right? So, they're super mini small. And she beat away on it for a few months, and then
remember this.
It just got put in the closet. Yeah. And so one day I was kind of like, well, I'm sitting here and I'm playing songs on the guitar. I need some low end. I need some drums, right? And so I went into her room and said, listen, you done with this? You gonna play with it anymore? She's like, no. So I took the drum kit and I ended up ripping them apart, taking the shells, kept the skins, and I created a situation where I had 2 bass pedals, and I hooked one up to the little bass drum and I hooked one up to the snare drum. And what that did was it started to allow me to play drums with my feet while I strummed the guitar and while I scream and yell and do whatever the hell it is.
So one-man band.
So I turned it into a one-man band, and that's what these recordings are. And it really is, it's funny, I hold myself to a completely different standard when I'm making music versus, say, art. Art, I hold myself to this impossible standard. It's not achievable in terms of what I want, this beauty, trying to make something so perfect. But with music, I'm interested in the ugly. It's the reverse. And so quite often, these songs that are on here, these were done in 1 or 2 takes, and they're recorded straight through, and that's it. And whatever you get is what you get. When I hit stop on the tape recorder, it was like, okay, that's the song. And so if the telephone rings in the background or someone's talking,
you're going to hear it.
It is what it is, and that becomes part of it.
Well, there's a certain honesty when it comes to like recording in someone's garage. You hear the breathing and any mistakes and the grunts and the,
Super
the struggle.
Yeah.
And when something's overly produced, musicians tend to become very self-aware, wanting to get everything correct.
And that's the same, I mean.
So there's a certain honesty that comes with.
And I'll tie that in because it ties into the photography as well. So that was me. So the second release was Carlos Stinser. And I was talking about how diverse the sounds are. So we're going from like garage punk to basically full on electronic ambient type
Completely
music.
different.
Yeah. Completely different. And so this was sort of his release. And it's 3 tracks, and then you get that idea. There's the square record, cut on plexi.
It's insane.
Double-sided.
I've never seen anything like that.
We created
Not
a
on plexi.
setup on SoundCloud with a download, so you could have the download. And what's cool about that is Carlos is, by trade, graphic designer, but really printmaker, trained as a printmaker. So he ended up creating a silkscreen print that comes with it. Oh my gosh,
so they're all artists.
Really? Yeah. This was editioned specifically for, so it's 15 prints, 15 records total. When they sell out, and so it's cool. And then we printed these and just created like a poster. So like the packaging folds out and made some stickers that can go along with it, And I've done that as well. Like, not everybody wants to necessarily buy the record or wants to shell out as much money for the record. So I've done things like silk screening t-shirts, just trying to create a little bit of merch to compensate. Mm-hmm. Because how the model is, basically, nobody's making any money off of this. I am a facilitator, a producer. And so the idea is when an artist comes on with Antilectual with me to kind of work and put out their product, they're basically in it for the love. They're giving me the music. We put out this wonderful limited thing. We get it out to the people. But all the money that I make off the sale of records or t-shirts that I print, it goes back into the pot for the next artist. And so it's a pay it forward situation. So what's happened is we sold enough of Carlos Stinser. He goes by Dirtlos. We sold enough of his to then basically I'm into, this is the test cut for our third release. And again, so strangely enough, I funded Carlos. Carlos is now funding Schumacher, who we're excited about. And this is the test cut. And right now we're working on the packaging for it. But we've got it. We've got the labels. We've got the test cut. And his music, again, totally different genre. What we have happening here is, I would say, more like psychedelia. Kind of psychedelic, rock, ambient. Just really, really cool.
Forge your own chains.
Yeah, and Reeve is just. These guys are awesome. Again, I don't get into bed with people that I don't want to. It's one of those things where it's like I admire these guys as artists, and I really admire the music, and I feel like it's worth being documented, put out. And so Reeve lives in Arles, France, right now. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing with this project in COVID, it's worked out, man. Everything, whether we're using WeTransfer or email, we can just exchange things back and forth. We can Zoom, we can figure it all out. I get a hold of the files, I compile it, we get the stuff cut. And so it's a process, it takes time. Not gonna lie to you, it's not like I'm able to crank these things out in a month. A lot of these turn into 4 or 5 month endeavors to basically get the thing done, sometimes up to 6 months, depending on time. But we keep it open. And then the real thing I'm sort of excited about is I've been experimenting. So I don't have it here, but I have a small machine at home that is able to cut audio, basically using just a simple needle. And so I've been experimenting with the concept of cutting onto CDs.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And as you can see the grooves are cut on the outside, all right? And they are noisy as hell. They are super lo-fi, but I love that. I love it about it. And so I have successfully been able to cut records onto 5-inch discs. And so the cool thing about this is records cut from the outside in, right? Uh-huh. CDs burn from the inside out. And so what I am now in the process of doing, and I'm thinking maybe after Reeve's release, I want to put a compilation out with a bunch of people where it's going to literally be a hybrid format. This thing is going to be able to play in your CD player with X amount of tracks, and then you can put it on your turntable at the same time and listen to the audio that's cut.
What?
So I'm working on that right now, and I'm super stoked about it. And then I ended up
this is crazy. I'm a music lover, so this is...
I ended up creating this sort of washer adapter. We've got that.
So excited.
And so that, obviously, when you want to put it in your CD player, you can do that. And then this basically is the adapter for the center ring, so you can drop it on your turntable and listen to it.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm really stoked on that. And so that's been successful. And I've been working on, people may not know, I used to be a graphic designer. It's what my undergraduate degree was in. That's what I did for a while before sort of realizing.
But was this when you were in California?
Yeah. And that's what I had studied early on. My master's degree is in painting.
Did living in California, did it have some sort an effect, an influence on you?
You know what's really strange is I think everybody, most people think I'm from California.
I thought you were from California when we first met.
To a certain, I almost believe that myself, and I think what a lot of that has to do with is growing up. I'm talking a young age. I was into music. I remember I was 7, and I was in love with Devo, and that was the beginning of they were a bunch of weirdos and freaks, and it was okay, this is fantastic. They're
oh my
doing
God,
something different.
Like Cheap Trick.
The early Cheap Trick has some awesome.
Trick.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And so that, and then skateboarding came along. Forget it.
Well,
that was everything.
People need to know you're a skateboarder too.
Yeah. That's a big part. It informed everything. And that when you're growing up and you're sort of a teenager, and punk rock and skateboarding, are you kidding? It was this marriage.
Ties in completely.
And it's art. I'm sorry, skateboarding, it's a bunch of freaks. The people that skate are artists. They're looking at things differently. They're seeing how they can adapt to terrain. It's it's like an artist looking at a blank canvas. What are they going to do to it? It's the same situation.
100%.
And so, so that all informed everything. So the idea, tying it back to California, I was so into skating, and sadly, I'm just getting older now. I'm coming up on 48 next month. And last couple of years, I had broken my wrist again. I had broken my shoulder, and so the body is not holding up quite as well. So skating is starting to kind of, I don't know. I'm having to put it back. I'm having to let it go a little bit, which is sad. But with that said, it informed me so much that, to be honest, there was no question. I was going out to California as soon as I could, And so when I got of age and the idea was hey, it's time to go to school, not even a thought about it. Draw that line across the map, and that was it. I'm headed to California. So, but the design thing, again, that's what I did. And so I'm already planning the packaging, which I'm kind of excited about on this comp album with the hybrid. And so if you remember the old floppies.
I do.
Yeah, so I had, of course...
80s kids, come on.
Yeah, well, I'm showing my age right now, because, some people may just be like, what the hell is this? So, that idea, I had some of these old floppies, and what you start to realize, that's the magnetic portion on the interior. Mm-hmm. That's what it would write to. But snipping the side, the discs can fit in the middle. And so there's your lathe cut. I did one on a DVD because I'm thinking maybe that might be something too, where I've got visual elements and then a record. But I'm getting excited about it because this is potentially what I'll do for the packaging. That will literally be the record sleeve. And I'll label it, but it's going to come out like an old floppy, And so I'm getting stoked on it. I'm excited about it, and it's fun. And as you can see, so yeah, I'm schizoid. I'm all over the place. So I'm working on these drawings. I've got these. This project is a continual thing. It's always happening. And then tying into the photography. I really got into, and I don't have everything here because a lot of this stuff is at home primarily. A lot of the photo stuff and the record stuff is done more at home. But I just got into making these weird lenses, and this was one of the first, So here I had a wide. This was like a 24 millimeter lens, and what I ended up doing. This is just PVC pipe fixture, and that is a peephole, a door peephole. And so
Oh,
now what I ended up doing was I dig through the recycling bin. So these are caps off like vitamin bottles, things of that nature.
right.
And so by finding a good fit, I'm able to focus this lens, right? It is just a sort of push-pull focus, right? And so what I can end up doing is I can adapt that to the top of the 24 and end up getting this really weird, dreamy kind of image.
This totally reminds me of pinhole photography and that Quaker Oats.
Without a doubt. And again, I like
Quaker
Lomo,
Oats box.
the lomography, like the sort of the weird sort of ghostly kind of prints you get. So then I got into using inferior lenses primarily. And so I found like this is an old Russian lens with like a Canon adapter ring because I'm still using like an old EOS, So it's a simple 50 millimeter sort of portrait lens, but inferior, really kind of dreamy, crappy quality to begin with. But I think it takes beautiful pictures. But what I found interesting as I looked at it long enough, the focus was on the exterior, it was out on the edge. And so the longer I looked at it, I couldn't help myself. I'm a tinker. I wanted to tear into it because I realized one of the cool things that I was inspired by was a lot of these shift lenses, the tilt lenses, right? Where you're getting, by tilting the lens, it ends up sort of creating a scenario where certain things are out of focus, some things are in focus.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just loving that imperfection. So I ended up buying myself another of these lenses, right? So there's the original lens. I took the casing off and I robbed it. I took the lens out, all right? And so what we end up doing is I took an inner tube, right? So that's the rubber off an inner tube.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Stretched it over the adapter ring on the inside, and then tied it into the lens itself, right? So I got rid of the housing. And so as such, what's cool is the aperture control,
But you have total control.
the aperture,
Yeah.
I still have access to. And then the focus, it's totally manual. So that's the one thing. These fancy tilt lenses, usually that you lock them into a certain place that you like and you shoot away. I will never get the same picture twice because I'm having to shoot and hold it at the same time. So I'm constantly doing this, changing the aperture, click. So I'll never get the same print twice. So it's a lot of fun to play with. And this I've just had, and again, digging through the trash, another sort of pill bottle, that's the lens cap, but I've had a lot of fun and a lot of success, and there's a bunch of others, and so you can kind of see that's the top of a bottle, but grinding things out because what I'm going to do is create a housing for a lens. These happen to be some telescope lenses that Jerry was getting rid of.
Gerardo
Ohovich, who works here. And so,
painter.
Yeah. And so I'm trying to basically build housing to then retrofit these to my camera, And so I just have fun constructing. I feel like I need to build the things, whether it be the robot to help make the drawings, whether it be the lenses to, again, help make the photos. And so some of the effects these are just, again, not fantastic photographs, but I think you get the idea of the dreamy quality. That's my daughter.
Charlie.
But you get a really weird, dreamy look. There's Gerardo.
I mean, they almost look...
I was in Savannah, Georgia, and that's a Waffle House. It was super foggy.
Oh.
Yeah, but I
That's
like
gorgeous.
the picture. I don't know why. I mean, it's totally, most people would throw that out because it's completely, a mess, but, so they're really, really bizarro. Or they're just fun. They have a look. This is Devin Caserta who works here.
Preparator.
Yeah. But there's something nice going on there, and I take pride in the fact that it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm shooting these with my lens, you know?
Well, there's something
And there's
about
something
building
about
your
that.
own
There's it,
and creating your own tools.
customize, right? And it's like, I don't know of anything, I don't think I own anything that hasn't been customized. You know, whether it be a skateboard, I'm doing something, you know, whether I'm making at least bare minimum, you got to make your own graphics, right? On the skateboard. But all the way to into scooters, you know, so like welding brackets to stretch them, lower them. Like, I can't leave things alone. Everything has to be customized. It has to be mine. You know, it has to be uniquely mine, you know, because I put my hand on it.
I mean, is that
And
advice?
that's the artist in me. I don't understand anybody. If you're truly an artist, isn't that what we do, right? We customize everything, right? And that's just how I've always sort of behaved. That's how I see things. You know?
Is that kind of advice that you give to your students in terms of if there's one thing that they could walk away from after taking a class with you?
You know what? The biggest thing I think I express to them is essentially keep an open mind to the unexpected. I think it's everything. And that's what happens here. I mean, this tinkering I'm talking about, really what it is it's experimentation. I find joy in not knowing what's going to happen. I might put these two things together and it may cause an explosion, but that's the excitement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I would tell all my students, you know, embrace the unexpected. Don't fall in. If you're not embracing the unexpected, what you've done is you've created a formula that you are just following and repeating, and it gets old. And so I don't know of any true real artist. If you're really an artist, it is about growth. It is about movement, right? Forward movement, stepping stones. You work on something to get you to the next, to get you to the next. If you're standing still, I don't know what you're doing, but you're not creating.
Mm-hmm.
You're not. And so that, I think that's the biggest thing I try to express is independent thinking and this concept of sort of.
I find most young artists, they do seek out a formula. And isn't that a mistake?
It's comfortable. Look, you know what?
Like Carmen Herrera sold her first piece when she was 88. It's years of doing what you love.
I love that.
I recommend every young artist needs to see the 100-Year Show.
You know, you're so right. And the idea is you have to ask yourself, if you are truly an artist, you need to ask yourself why you're in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't pay. Stop expecting the payout. You know, it's not about that. The reward is it's self-gratification. The idea is I go into the studio, I start with nothing, and at the end of the day, I walk out with something. I'm a simple man that likes the tangible, and I like to be able to walk out and say, hey man, you know what? I didn't have this at the beginning of the day, and now I do. I made this. And you know what? Tomorrow, maybe I'll figure out a way to make it better. And that's the idea. And I don't know any other way. I think that is one of the most important sort of things as an artist, because again, just stop. You got to ask yourself what you want out of art. If art is this idea of a career for you or something that you're pursuing, I'm the first to tell students, don't quit your day job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that to protect them financially. I'm saying it to actually help keep them honest. Because if they don't get swallowed by the art world, the business side of the art world, right? It's very easy to fall prey to that. And the idea is you start making things that you anticipate will sell. You've already compromised yourself the minute you sort of start to get into that. And I get it. You need to put bread on the table. But that's my idea. Don't quit your day job. Find time, manage your time well. It will provide you, if you do so, it'll provide you with enough time to keep creating. And all of that will maintain itself. It will be kept honest, you know, as opposed to having to ever compromise. And the other thing too is, formula you were talking about. I get that too. Look, people strive for this concept of signature styles,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you want to be recognized. You want to be able to, if someone sees it and they say, that's so-and-so, end of story. And that sells, right? And what you've done is, it's like putting a fancy label on a pair of jeans. That's all you've done. You've created a label for yourself. You're a stock at that point to be traded. And it just becomes, I just see it as problematic because, again, where does the growth, as we were talking about before, Once you fall into that, you once again have compromised yourself. You're going to take the payoff versus the growth, right? And galleries don't like it. The flip side of that too is they like the money that starts to roll in when you sort of develop something that is selling. And the minute you tell them, you know what, I'm tired of making those, I'm moving on. What? They don't like to hear that, you know? And so that becomes problematic as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a lot to think about, but like I said, integrity and sincerity, I think, is a huge part of this. Ask yourself why you're in it. Or to be quite honest, if you're, well, you probably don't need to ask yourself. If you're truly...
You're going to make the work anyway.
Right, if you truly can't help yourself, right? Because it's like, we're addicts. I view this art thing as a curse, a complete curse on my life. I've tried to run away from it. I can't. I have to be making things. Like, it's like a shark in water. If I stop swimming, that's it, you know? And so I have to be creating things. And it's funny, I've got my daughter, Charlie. She's 15 now. Super talented. At her age, I already think she's a better artist than I ever was. The funny thing is, she's at this stage where she's involved in a lot. She likes ballet. She likes all sorts of different things, not just the fine arts.
She takes after her dad.
Maybe, but I don't want to take credit for it. But here's the deal, you know, she's not necessarily completely pursuing it. And I'm okay with that. Because, again, I don't wish this on anybody. But it's always there for her. And it'll be one of those things when she decides, you know, if, hey, I shouldn't have let that go. I want to get back into painting. Or maybe when I'm in college, I'll decide to start studying it again.
Yeah.
Then so be it, you know. It's always there for you. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
Yeah.
For showing me. This has been a treat for me today. So if you have any questions at all for Kyle and his projects, Antilectual Recordings, please leave them in a comment and we'll get back to you. So
yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for taking the time to show us your studio, show us the tools you make in your art. It's amazing.
Well, again, it's a strange time. So, like, you're catching me, in a weird way, it's probably good. You're catching me at such a strange time in terms of, like, I'm at that sort of experimental stage again, where I'm playing around with a bunch of ideas. In a year from now, I don't know. One of these paths, some of these may converge, some may be abandoned, or maybe I end up back to straight non-objective painting again. I'm not sure, but that's the fun part of this, guys. It's a ride. Roll with it.
Roll with it. Thank you so much. Bye,
Take
Kyle.
care. Be good.